This is my week 7 reflection over week 6 readings. In chapter 7 of Tversky, 2011, she laid out the principles and practices of background knowledge. That was on page 147. On page 148, Tversky, 2011, defines prior knowledge as the sum total of all that we've experienced throughout our lives. The older a child is, the more prior knowledge they will have. My 6th grade students had a lot more prior knowledge than my kindergarten students, for example. She gave the examples, the places we visited, the friends we've made, the conversations we've had, the conversations we've heard, and the books we've read. That was Tversky, 2011, page 148. Back to that, conversations we've heard, you would be surprised at things my kindergarten students have heard and shared back with me or other students. They may have only been here on this earth for 5 or 6 years, but they're sponges, and they take it all in and then spit it right back out. Tversky, 2011, defines background knowledge as the knowledge of the world we've accrued through our formal education and our understanding of the world. It relates to academics, to all the content area topics we've studied in school, and what we learn through our outside experiences with them. That was on page 148. So according to this definition, my kindergarten students would have significantly less background knowledge because they have had less formal education. While most read alouds are typically fiction books, facts can motivate and engage children and develop their reading and writing skills as much as fiction. That's found on page 148. The problem is we are not using enough nonfiction texts in our read alouds, and if we are using them, are we representing all types? On page 149, Tversky, 2011, divides informative text into 3 groups: narrative informational text, expository informational text, and mixed text. Narrative informational text are written in story format and include biographies and autobiographies. Expository informational text are usually written in third person about something in the natural world, like rocks or soil. When I taught 6th grade, I had to teach a unit on rocks and soil. I really failed to make that interesting. That was difficult. The books on that subject were so dry. The mixed text have both types of features in it. The more information we can read to our students through nonfiction text, the better off they will be. Tversky, 2011, says the beauty of the relationship between what you already know and what you are learning is its spiraling effect. The more you know, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more you read. And the more you read, the more you know. That was on page 150. There are other benefits to reading nonfiction text too, according to Tversky, 2011. Science, social studies, and math connections become easier. Our students' minds make connections book by book. Many lessons become more varied, and there is also increased comprehension. Those are found on page 150 and 151. Tversky, 2011, says that our informational books in our classroom should be 3 things: attractive, accurate, and accessible. That's found on page 151. Attractive, lots of colorful photos and illustrations. Accurate, up to date, and written by an expert or researcher. This is one that can be a little challenging, especially with topics that don't stay current for long. Books, especially good books, are expensive and hard to replace with a teacher's budget. I try to add my class library through Scholastic Book Orders, and often I can get them for free with the points that I built up. And accessible. Books for younger students should not have too much information, vocabulary, or too many concepts. That's found on page 151 to 152. Tversky, 2011, says that we need to teach students how to read informational texts, not in the beginning to end, top to bottom way, but in a more random, pick and choose, interest-driven way. That's found on page 153. I think to how I enjoy reading an Entertainment Weekly magazine. I don't read it front to back. Instead, I flip around to the parts I'm really interested in. I read those first. The pictures will sometimes draw me in before the title of the article. I read all the captions under the pictures to get a better idea of what I'm looking at. Another suggestion Tversky, 2011, has when reading nonfiction Informational text is to front-load read-alouds, guided reading, etc., with an explanation of concepts children will discover as they read. That was found on page 153. Another thought she had was to read aloud and easier text on a topic first, also on 153. Tversky 2011 urges teachers to teach students how to use what they know to make sense of what they're reading and celebrate when they do, page 155. I do this a lot with my kindergartners by using Think Alouds. By sharing my thought process, I can go through the steps for them. My hope is they will try to do the same thing the next time they read. I also model conscious inferences. Tversky 2011 defines conscious inferences as times where we intentionally pause because we don't understand what we are reading and we must stop to figure things out. Tversky 2011 thinks this modeling is a good idea. We haven't chatted or anything, but in her book she said that children need to see us stop short as a passage puzzles us. They need to think aloud about why it isn't making sense and what we'll do to get our thinking back on track. Page 157. I guess I'm doing something right. Now on to the Ladson-Billings article. In the Ladson-Billings article, 2014 article was interesting because rarely you'll find someone looking back at something they have written and tweak it to make it more relevant. Ladson-Billings 2014 credits most of her shift in thinking due to her experience with the hip-hop and spoken word program called First Wave. That was on page 74. She also said that she further reviewed her study because researchers and practitioners are moving and evolving in new ways that require us to embrace a more dynamic view of culture. That's found on page 75. Ladson-Billings 2014 took a look at students as subjects and not objects. That's found on page 76. By focusing on student learning and academic achievement versus classroom and behavior management, cultural competence versus cultural assimilation or eradication, and socio-pathological consciousness, rather than school-based tasks that have no beyond school application, she was able to see students take both responsibility for and deep interest in their education. That was all found on page 76 to 77. It was a mouthful. In the final article of the week, Vasquez 2010, like Ladson-Billings 2014, talked about pedagogy. I'm sure I said that wrong. Page 1. It's early. She spoke of a time when some of her students were trying to find books that had Filipino characters because the student had just moved from the Philippines and they had no luck in looking in their library. She then did a class project focusing on the question, do we see ourselves in the books in our school library? That was found on page 1. I found this interesting because in EDRD 5502, the other class I'm taking right now, we just talked about this idea with our book talk projects. As a white male, I see myself in texts that I read all the time. The majority of read-aloud books have white characters in them. I can't recall a book about Filipinos. Even a larger part of the U.S. population, African Americans, are not as widely depicted in children's books. A concern I may have would be that if you got Filipino books just to say you have them, is that good, even if they're not what Tversky 2011 would call high quality text. That's all I have for today.